Você que tá aí ouvindo o podcast, sabia que o poder de construir a carreira profissional dos seus sonhos também está em suas mãos? Na pós-graduação do Senac, você encontra diversos cursos com 12 meses de duração, além de estudar com aulas presenciais mais EAD. E tem mais, o TCC é opcional. Tudo isso para você conciliar trabalho, estudos e vida social. Quer mais? Você também pode ter até 50% de desconto. Confira as condições no site sp.senac.br/pós-graduação. Quer saber? Senac.
Empire. Changing times for advertisers in sports.
So we've been able to offer that up in a way that allows the brand to reach the entire audience, which is where the business is headed as it sorts its way through all of this disruption that has occurred as people convert from cable to streaming. Probably not dissimilar to the disruption that occurred when Ted Turner decided to put all the Braves games on cable.
Yeah. That's Kent Heyman, CEO of Cast Iron Media, who's helping teams and leagues find their fans in a diverse streaming world. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. Teams and leagues are still getting TV and streaming rights. Others are making a go of it on their own with over-the-top platforms. And then there are the bridge ideas like placing content back on over-the-air media. It is a complicated world of live sports out there. Our guest this week is Kent Heyman. He's the CEO of Cast Iron Media, which is building a state-of-the-art live sports media buying platform for connected TV as we continue to delve into new ways that fans and consumers are engaging with sports and live programming. Hi, Kent. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, Bram. How you doing?
Tell us a little bit about Cast Iron Media. What's the background?
Yeah, so Cast Iron Media, as you said, it's a tech-enabled live sports platform, and it was basically designed to facilitate that transaction that happens, billions of times a year, where a team or a league or a sports rights owner has valuable inventory that has engaged viewers watching it, and brands and advertisers want to get in front of those viewers. So we're able to facilitate that transaction in the wake of all of the change and disintermediation that's going on in the industry today because of the way that the internet has disrupted the viewing experience. And we see viewers transitioning from cable to streaming, as you know, and it's a hot issue in sports. And how do the leagues and the teams and the rights holders survive during these transitional years? And we think we serve an interesting role in that process.
Okay, so tell me about how you came around to this is the solution that we're going to provide for the here and now for teams and leagues.
Yeah, so we had an in-venue advertising platform, so we were present when the fans were present. We still continue to do that business. It's part of our business. We call it our Crowd Connect Live product. But as you'll recall, during the pandemic, for a while, games weren't played at all. And after that, games were played with no fans in the stadium. So we started thinking that we were exposed from a business standpoint and started doing some research. Doing that, we came across a company that had sort of pioneered an aspect of streaming. The company was called Revit, and we ended up investing in them and ultimately acquiring them back in 2021. And their business really was something new. It was dealing with, what happens if you want to get in front of a fan that's watching a streamed game that isn't the home team. You might be sitting in Texas watching a game between the Red Sox and the Yankees, and the RSN is carrying that game. How do you get in front of that fan? So we sort of pioneered that business. And through that, we've been able to develop relationships with people that have rights to broadcast games and with the agencies that seek those audiences. And we've been able to knit the two together with a technology platform that we call the Foundry.
For what you just said, I think I understand, but are you saying you can advertising for home fans versus someone who's out of the demographic region or the geographical region and separate those advertising options for teams?
So, Yes, except a little bit different. What I would say is we're able to actually unify it. So historically, the RSNs carried the home team games.
Yeah.
Uh, but for example, for baseball, MLB retained the rights to on MLB TV to show the out-of-market games. And by partnering with them, we've been able to offer to a brand that used to, for example, if a brand wanted to advertise in, I don't know, Texas, and they were only advertising with the RSN on the RSN production, they were only getting half the audience. The other half was watching another game somewhere. They might be watching, the White Sox play the Brewers. So we've been able to offer that up in a way that allows the brand to reach the entire audience, which is where the business is headed as it sorts its way through all of this disruption that has occurred as people convert from cable to streaming. Probably not dissimilar to the disruption that occurred when Ted Turner decided to put all the Braves games on cable. And
yeah,
it's funny, Graham. I was getting a little nostalgic last week. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the MLB commemorative game in Birmingham, and I was a big Willie Mays fan. And they had a lot of videos that they were showing about his career. And when I grew up, I heard it from Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons on the radio. I didn't get to see any of it, but that was a baseball fan in the '60s. Cable changed that. Cable got to the point where you could watch a lot of this stuff on television. And now the internet is changing it even more. So access is going to be ubiquitous. But today it's tricky because you got to figure out which cable platform is showing which event. And so as fans sift through that chaos and confusion that exists today in the market, and brands sift through it, we make it easier for them by giving them a place where they can come and access all those fans.
Yeah. In terms of working with the brands themselves, as you're discussing, and obvious is just the reality of, the future of watching live sports, you can do it on many devices anywhere that you want, which probably changes the dynamic of which brands want to be involved in this and how they want to be involved in this. So how do you think about it from their perspective of helping the teams match up with brands that meet the needs of the fans where they are?
Well, that's a good question. So there's a lot of learning that needs to happen in the industry right now. There are a lot of people, when they think streaming, they think you're watching it on a laptop or a mobile device, and that may be the case. But it's really not always the case. And in fact, the predominant viewer of a streamed broadcast is watching it on the same format device as somebody who was watching on cable. It's the production value is no different. What they're watching is no different. The only thing that's different is the way the signal gets to the device. So most of the viewers that we enable today, not all, are watching on a large format device, just as you would in your living room watching a football game or a basketball game or a baseball game.
Let's talk about some of the other options that teams are thinking about as well right now and how you're thinking about that. The number of the RSNs have had financial issues. Teams are moving to over-the-top platforms. Others have thought about using traditional old over-the-air television, at least as a bridge, to keep their audiences intact. Maybe I'll just ask you this way. Where are we in all of this? It doesn't feel like there's an answer to where everything is and is going to be down the road.
That's a great question. And I think, if I pretended that I knew the answer, I'd probably expose myself as a fraud because nobody really knows. But what we are seeing is traditional barriers to viewership are being broken down. So kind of interesting. You see, for example, the Utah Jazz, I think you might be referring to them expanding their network and going outside of what was traditionally a restricted audience because of cable and enabling it for traditional broadcast. So ultimately, we're going to see fanship, I think, expand. The means of viewing varied. Not everyone's going to give up their cable. Many will. I think most will. It certainly seems to be a strong, inexorable trend. But you're going to have viewers now over many different types of video feeds, but ultimately all doing the same thing. They're watching a team they love and they're being engaged by it. And the value of that produced event or game is no different than it was before streaming was decided. It's just the signal is getting to the fan a little bit differently. So the trick is going to be, enabling the teams to get in front of the brands that want to be exposed to the game in a way that's unified. And our view of that is through our technology platform, we can unify that experience. So we have our own ad server that we developed that's specific for live sports. We have a live sports scheduler to ensure that the brand gets on a live game and, not something else. And we have various supportive technologies that ensure completion rates are higher than basically was traditionally expected in the linear viewing experience. So all of those things make it easier for a brand to sort through some of the chaos while the world figures out what's going to happen with RSNs, who survives, who doesn't, and where the rights go if they don't survive.
Yeah. And it's interesting to watch the trends of how the teams are thinking about it. Here in Washington, we have a very forward-thinking group, the Leonsis Monumental Group, that have built their own network. The Washington Capitals, Washington Wizards, Washington Mystics, and others are on it. Then you see what's happening in Chicago, where a quote-unquote streaming RSN is just being built, and it's including a number of the teams in that city across different sports as well. And even different ownership groups are involved in that. So I don't think anybody knows exactly what the answer is. Kind of to your point, I think we're all trying to figure this out on the fly.
Yeah, and that's where we come in, particularly in our working with ad agencies that manage campaigns for large concentrations of ad brands. And they're as confused as the average sports fan. So, sometimes I want to watch a game. Probably maybe a little unique, but I get on Google and I try to figure out what streaming platform it's on. And if I have that platform, I watch it on it. If I don't have that platform, if it's worth it enough to me, I sign up for it so I can watch. That's a little more confusing than it was when everything was either on cable or wasn't on cable. And it's confusing for the brands too. They're trying to figure out how they get in front of these fans. Traditionally, what they did with linear television rights was much simpler. So we try to simplify that transaction for them. And we also try to make it possible for people who want to advertise on a non-national basis to reach targeted demographic areas that they want to reach for purposes of their campaign. So we can target down to the zip code. If somebody wants to do a campaign in 4 or 5 different DMAs spread across the country, we can do it for them, even though it's more transactionally intense than just doing a national campaign. Because of our technology, we can do many, many small transactions and aggregate them into a large campaign, which typically wasn't done at scale before we developed the technology to do it. And frankly, we had to do it. Our business was growing so fast that, where we were in our first month, we might have sent out 4 or 5 bills, and, in a few months we were sending out thousands, and we had to automate that process, not just for the brand's sake, but for our own sake.
Future Sport is a presentation of Empire Media, a B2B and B2C podcast and digital company dedicated to making your business or brand be heard. Internal or external content creation that will have a lasting impact on your strategy, consulting, creation, and production, all to help you effectively communicate your message in any marketplace. Learn more at empiremedia.com, AMPIRE media.com. This reminds me a little bit, because I'm in the podcasting world, and first it was just kind of open season, and all of a sudden there were all of these options, and then people tried to figure out, well, where do I listen to it? That started to get streamlined, and then advertisers needed a marketplace to spread out the advertising dollars because it was so widespread. And it's odd because we're using sports with the same analogy, which is old, tried and true. You know who the fans are, but the access to how you were going to watch it and engage with it just so radically changed that it felt like it needed a complete reset here.
Yeah, no doubt. There are definitely comparisons, but you hit the nail on the head with sports. Sports it's the constant, right? It has been, it is, and in my view, always the premium content type. People love to watch sports, and advertisers, because of that, advertisers love to get in front of people who are watching sports because they are engaged, they're passionate. And you look at in the streaming world, sports fans are very unique in that they will pay for a subscription and sit through a commercial or an ad. In fact, sometimes they get a little upset if the ad space is blank and there's no ad in there. There are natural breaks in sports.
Yeah.
In baseball, what do you do between innings? And look at what happens in the Super Bowl. It's, people love to see ads in the Super Bowl. It's part of the entertainment. So sports is unique that way. And the value of sports will endure. The way that people consume it is changing. And as a result, some of the traditional business models around how you reach those people will change.
Yeah.
But in the end, the value is still there and it will prevail. So through a few years of disruption and I think, reestablishment of some of the economic factors that have been disintermediated, I think you're going to see a resurgence in advertising revenue that's driven by sports after maybe a couple of 3-year pause.
Yeah. Let me talk about the other side again with you. I know we're trying to guess here a little bit, but you're kind of in the middle of it and watching this all materialize. And obviously advertising dollars will steer a lot of the direction that all of this is going to go. So all of these different teams and all these different leagues have all these different streaming platforms and they're all charging different prices. It feels like while it may not be called a cable bundle, at some point, doesn't this have to bundle back up and become a place where everybody goes to again to get all or most of the content that they want?
Yeah, it's almost ironic in a way that, a lot of the fans that originally were happy to get away from the oppressive cable packaging for expense reasons find that really to have a diverse array of streaming platforms, it's as expensive or sometimes even more so. But I think ultimately the fans like the ability to self-control that. They can subscribe or not subscribe as their taste suit, and they're not forced into a cable package, which seemed to have been the MO of a lot of the cable packages in the past. So, but there will be some unification. I think there needs to be as people find a reliable platform. There will be platforms that dominate. We hope we're one of them. As people find, reliable means of accessing the valuable broadcasts that are being produced, I think you're going to see some consolidation. It's necessary, particularly as you look at amassing some of the smaller market teams that might want to get economies of scale that wouldn't be available if they just deal with their own market.
Kent, you can't be the only group that's doing this. What differentiates what you're doing from others in the marketplace?
Well, we like to think that we're smarter than the rest. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, our differentiation, more than anything else, is through our technology, we're able to offer a service to, and we hear this all the time from our agency customers on how reliable the service is. Our completion rates, our ability to guarantee that they're in front of live games, not just live sports. There's a difference between live sports and live games. They want to be, those who want to be on the games, we guarantee that. We have high completion rates, and we can do it at scale in diverse transactions. And I think that makes us very unique. It can only be done with a technology platform like the Foundry. And because we were involved in the industry at its nascent stages, we were able to develop the technology alongside of developing our knowledge as to how to grind out these transactions.
And things are changing fast. You even just mentioned that 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is, I think we're all going to get into a space where it's bundled, if it's, lack of a better word, or everyone's going to be streamlined into understanding where to find everything. So in the short term, what are milestones that you're looking for this year and into next year?
Well, it's important to us to see at what point do some of the rights go back to teams and leagues. I know there's a lot of legal wrangling about some of it, particularly with Diamond Sports, and there have been some of those things. And I think the result of that will have a big impact and will ultimately have a bit of a settling effect as people figure out how to make the most value out of their rights. So that's something we're watching very carefully, what will happen in those legal proceedings and what the product of it will be and where those rights end up. And the other has to do with teams' commitments to the streaming platform. Are they committed to having the right technology that is designed to promote live sports as opposed to technologies that are being, utilized for something they weren't designed to be utilized for? Some of the technologies out there that are being used today are great, but they weren't designed for live sports. When, most of the activity happens in the evening, for example, during baseball season, as opposed to on a 24/7 clock. Breaks aren't scheduled. You never know when a pitcher's going to get changed or somebody's going to call a timeout.
Yeah.
Or when there's going to be a rain out or a rain delay. And these are all things that our technology has been designed to accommodate.
It's interesting you bring up the idea of, the rights going back to teams or leagues. And we're seeing a lot of that happening. And at the same time, just think about the biggest league in this country, the NFL, who did program and did produce some of their own live sports content and ended up going back to the providers, CBS, Fox, Amazon now, NBC, ESPN, because the quality is better by those. So I wonder if the teams in the leagues will always kind of value the outside platforms who professionally produce the content as opposed to trying to do it in-house, or if they'll even have a choice in the matter down the road.
Yeah, I wonder about that a little bit too, and I'm not sure I have an answer on that, Bram, although I do think that the NFL is somewhat unique in the value that it produces and the number of games it produces. They don't have, those teams don't play 162 games. So I think it's a little bit of a different product for that reason.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And certainly they've figured out something that's created enormous value for everybody involved in that particular business.
Okay, last thing. Things are getting crowded in this space too, thanks to the internet, thanks to streaming, thanks to opportunity, and thanks to changing tastes. And we're seeing this in real time with women's sports. The WNBA is exploding in popularity. The NWSL and women's soccer is exploding in popularity. There are other leagues that are gaining, I don't know if gaining, at least for eyeballs and for engagement. So how are you kind of thinking about that from your perspective about all the different options and all the different things that fans seem to be interested in these days?
So that's a great question. You know, from our standpoint today, our business is driven by viewership, right? The more concentrations of viewers that there are and the more episodes of that there are, if you will, the better for us. So baseball, basketball, hockey, lots of games, lots of viewers, lots of opportunities to get in front of brands. But at the same time, we have an eye on the future. And part of that for us is, just as you said, it's women's sports. It's exploding. It's popular. People like it. So whether it's the WNBA or any other burgeoning women's sports, we're in the process of forging relationships with those products as well so that we can offer them as they grow in popularity. And they're an important part of our future.
Kent Heyman is the CEO of Cast Iron Media. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bram.
That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.